One of the big questions we're all going to be asking ourselves as we venture out a little bit in the next few weeks and months is how easy is it to get this virus? And the question medically means is really how easily does it transmit? How does it pass from one person to another? And obviously they believe that part of the problem with this virus, COVID-19, that's made it spread so quickly around the world is that it's airborne. Right? We knew in the early days, wash your hands. Don't shake hands with people. If you touch someone with the virus, they've wiped their nose with their hand or coughed into their hand or whatever, the virus can spread from one person to another. But the reason we're staying 6 feet apart is that we believe it can get into the air. But the question goes even beyond that. Does it stay in the air? So you sneeze, water droplets come out of your body. They hang in the air for a few seconds. Somebody walks through or is standing in that bubble of virus. They inhale it. They can get sick. But normally they would drop to the ground. Those water droplets drop to the ground, take the virus with it. Does this virus hang in the air even longer? And it's one of the things they're looking at inside the long-term care facilities, where this has been a problem all over the world, particularly in the city of Montreal. Montreal is considered now the 7th deadliest place on earth when it comes to COVID-19. And there are a lot of complicated reasons for that. But like everywhere else, their long-term care facilities have been a real focus, a real hotspot of death. And what's happening in those long-term care facilities, because believe me, I've talked to people who've worked in them, they say, Bill, this disease is easily spread. We are taking all the precautions in the world. We're washing everything. We're wearing our equipment. And yet it just spreads like a wildfire. There's something more going on. Is it actually getting into the air, into the ventilation systems, and spreading throughout that way? Caroline Duchaine is a researcher at the Quebec Heart and Lung Institute, and she's a professor at Université Laval, Department of Biochemistry. She is studying airborne transmission of COVID-19, and she's gone into a long-term care home to do some research. She's on the line right now. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Now, I don't have a doctor on my name, and I'm not a professor, so if you want to go back and just clarify anything I've said, am I on the right track when I talked about sneezing out the virus is one thing, but having it hang in the air is even more dangerous?
Yeah, I think when it comes to this particular virus, I don't think it behaves differently than most of the other respiratory viruses when it comes to being spread like outside of the body and also for long distance in aerosol particles. So when we talk about aerosol particles, we talk about like very small particles, like 5 nanometers and smaller. So those small particles remain airborne for almost like forever. You know, they very, very slowly settle down. So all the respiratory viruses, they are shed by the person who is infected, and any type of shape and form of droplets, big droplets and small aerosols as well. But for this disease, the only way I think you were wrong in your introduction was that what we are afraid of is not that it would be transmitted through the ventilation systems. It's the opposite. So for long-term care facilities, what was observed so far is that most of those buildings sheltering like 50, 100, 200 sick people have no ventilation working whatsoever, besides maybe some natural ventilation. So our hypothesis is that the virus in its airborne form will likely like build up and be very concentrated, and then it can spread. It can spread to other people on other areas of the building, but also it can settle down like much further from the infected person. So where in area where you would think there is no droplet, there's no contamination, then surfaces can also be contaminated by aerosol that deposited like meters and meters and meters away from the infected person.
Right, but if someone is restricted to one room, Caroline.
I'm sorry?
If you have a patient who's staying in one room in a long-term care facility, how is it getting out into the rest of the facility? Is it being carried out by the people who go in and visit and touch the surfaces? Does it get on their bodies, or are you opening the door and you have concentrated virus that then sweeps out into the hallways?
Exactly. We observe the same thing. Like a few years ago, we studied the virus responsible for gastroenteritis, norovirus, who causes like big outbreaks in hospitals. So someone has diarrhea, and then the other day, everybody on the floor has the diarrhea.
Right.
And what we found is that those patients are in their room. They don't get out. They're like isolated. Otherwise, but the door is open all the time, so people can get to the patient. And then it's the same from what I have observed in long-term care facilities. The doors are open, all the time. People get in, they leave the door, and of course the air doesn't know there's a door there, so the air just circulates everywhere. So if, like in Quebec, in the province of Quebec and other like provinces from northern areas of the world, like for energy consumption management, like most of those very old buildings are not ventilated. So then what happens is that the air circulates with the movement of the people, and some of it will be renewed by natural ventilation from some windows that are open, but there is no air exchange. And if I can make a comparison, we've been sampling over 100 samples at the head of the patients at intensive care and intermediate care in hospitals, okay? So we are sampling the air beside the head of a patient who is highly symptomatic and very sick with COVID-19, and we find almost no virus airborne. And I think, from my perspective, the reason why we don't find much is that those rooms are kept at 12 air change an hour, so it's very highly ventilated. So whatever is produced by the patient, it will just be like sent away from the room, like
sucked
by the ventilation.
Out of the room. So the ventilation, the key is not that you're just blowing air from one room to another, but you're constantly bringing in fresh air from outside.
Exactly. Or if you don't have access to fresh air, let's say it's winter, it's minus 25, you cannot have access to fresh air. There are options of portable HEPA filtration systems that could be maybe put in place, and we hope that, we don't have the results yet. We will have the results from the analysis that we did yesterday and Wednesday in Montreal in some centers with very, very low ventilation. We hope that we can, after this, ask the managers to just work on ventilation, because for prevention purposes, we usually think of the problem from top to bottom, and the top would be engineering approaches. So how can you make sure that the contaminant doesn't build up in a certain environment? So I think ventilation is probably one of the key solutions to those outbreaks. And of course, there is a hierarchy of methods from which any infectious agents would spread using various types of strategies. And of course, contact and droplets is certainly the most important in this case as well, as it is for influenza or as it is for the common cold.
Really interesting. I think I know why colds spread so much in radio studios now, with the limited new air that comes into the room.
Yeah, it's very often. Exactly.
Yeah. So we all have to look at our workplaces too as we go back to work, and ventilation is going to be a big key here. What is you go around the rooms and I guess you're looking for the virus. What's the strangest place you've found the virus, an unexpected place?
Our team has really focused on air in hospitals and then in long-term care facilities, but like some of the people in other teams, such as the team who asked us to go to Montreal, they found it like at the door frame, and nobody's touching the door frame. Like the door is very high, like over 6-7 foot tall.
On the top of the door frame.
Yeah, exactly. This is why they said, oh my goodness, there's something happening through the air, because there's no way the virus would go there. Like even if someone is coughing, it would never go up to the door frame. So this is a very good indicators that the virus is very likely transported through the air. However, I need to specify that so far, nobody in the world has shown that this virus can be found infectious airborne. So this is the next step. So this is why the samples that we've been taken will be sent out for culture. So we don't want only to know if the virus is there. So can we measure it with molecular approaches? In this case, we just count the number of viruses, but we will also see if it remains infectious in the air.
Caroline Duchaine, researcher at Quebec Heart and Lung Institute. That's amazing stuff.